Who was the creepiest person you've ever seen or met? When I was in my early 20s, I stopped at a gas station near my apartment after work to grab some drinks. When I grabbed the half came from the cooler, I heard a voice behind me say, "Ooh, we are going to a party." Good tonight. I turned around confused, and this older fella grabs the drink from my hand and then puts his arm around my shoulder like we were old buddies or something. He had a vice grip on me, and I was pretty scared. I'm not a small guy, but I was out of shape, and this dude was quite strong. He started telling me how he and his girlfriend was going to come back to my place while he walked me up to the counter. Luckily, I was able to signal the clerk when scary dude looked out the window toward his car. I mouthed, "Help me," and he nodded scarily. The guy had to release his hug on me to get out the door, as we both couldn't fit, and he went out first. I glanced back to the clerk, starting to panic, and he quietly said, "Close the door, I'll lock it." So as soon as he was through, I pulled it shut and held it. While possibly life-saving, Clark locked it with a button behind the counter. The creepy guy was furious when he realized he was locked out and started slamming his fists against the glass door. The clerk yelled he was calling the police, and the dude actually threw the drink on the ground and jumped in his hope and tore out. I thanked the clerk profusely and praised him for thinking quickly. He said, unfortunately, since we weren't in the best area in the city, he'd had to use the button. Before, it was scary to think about what could happen. I was planning to stomp as hard as I could onto the top of his foot once outside and then just run, but who knows how it might have turned out. I had a similar thing visiting Seattle. Girlfriend was seasick from the ferry ride, so went for a walk about strange town by myself after the dark. The good idea, went to get a drink at a convenience store and was asked by 3 guys for money. Outside, I lied and said I had no cash. Suddenly realized I had all the vacation money in my pocket, like $sign down, just looking in the cooler, and the guys are now behind me suggesting I get a certain kind of drink, buy a whole case. Then I realized they are trying to make me buy them a case of drink and did have to pull out a stack of Benjamins to do that. I played nice and suddenly realized I had a single $1 bill I could spare. The guys that took it and left, I 100 expected them to be lying and wait outside, so I asked the cashier to watch me as I leave just in case, obviously. Lift, but I used the buddy system. Now, was this the 7-Eleven on First and Cherry? I once had a wasted guy across me. They're trying to get me to buy him a drink at 7. Pioneer Square is an interesting place, lots of good lunch places though, so due to my job, I encounter a lot of creepy people and angry people and people suffering from mental health issues that may come off as creepy, but one guy stands above the rest. I responded to a domestic call. I arrive on the side of the roadway and find a woman and her 3 kids. Come to find out her boyfriend attempted to run her and her children over with high car, circling back around and making a second pass. Eventually, she decided she didn't want to press charges. She just wanted to go to her mother's house, so I give her and the kids a ride as she is ushering the kids inside. A crappy little car pulls into the driveway behind my patrol car. The car pulls in at an extremely high rate of speed, and the door flies open before it's even totally stopped. I've been on my fair share of domestics, so I already know this is a crap bag boyfriend, but as soon as he exited the car, I knew something was different. I figure it was some primal thing deep in my head, but immediately every hair stood on end. My vision came into sharper focus and my whole body tensed up. The way he moved, the way he looked, the way his eyes looked through me and locked on his girlfriend. There was something wrong with this man, more wrong than the usual domestics or assaults or what have you. This man had an air of evil about him that I have only felt one other time in my career, and I hesitate to use the word evil. Most people made a bad decision or a series of bad decisions. Some are even just bad, crappy people, but evil is rare. Evil is not a common thing, but I firmly believe this man was evil. He and I exchanged a few words. The way he spoke was like a barely contained feral animal foaming and itching to attack its prey. However, girlfriend had no injuries, and she did not want to press charges, so I couldn't arrest him and end it right there. I stepped toward him, got in his face, and told him that I knew exactly who he was and where he lived. I told him that if he came back to this house for any reason, I was going to find him and take him to jail for trespassing if necessary. He locked eyes with me, dead flat eyes with a little ember of hatred in them, and got back in his car and drove away. He didn't come back to the house that night. Lucky for her, the entire encounter is seared in my brain. I've been in way scarier situations, face down way more physically imposing people, but that was the first time I ever encountered someone who radiated evil in that way. I hate that woman probably went back to live with him, plus the kids. Do you know what happened to her? Please say she left him. Unfortunately, I do not know what became of her. I sincerely hope she got away from him. I don't see that relationship ending in anything other than tragedy. He was a serial liar, so not creepy in the traditional sense, but after working with him in a very intimate environment. You get to know everyone when you're a teacher. I was just creeped out by how casually he lied or fibbed. It just didn't all add up. He was 26, yet he had enough achievements supposedly under his belt that he should have been pushing 40. At the very least, after a month or two, everyone at school caught on to his serial lying, boasting, fibbing, and how he tried to manipulate us, and we all shunned him as a collective. The whole I once knew a dude who straight up told people that he had an associate's degree. Yes, associates in astrophysics, and had studied under Neil deGrasse Tyson. He also liked to talk about his time in the U.S. Army and his one deployment, but he tells some people it was to Iraq and tell others that it was to Afghanistan. He also liked to boast about his security clearance, like any of us were supposed to care. I saw the military discharge paperwork he washed out of basic training after week 4. He just lied so effortlessly and could be very, very convincing. It was unsettling once I began to see through his lies and catch the inconsistencies in our sounds right up his alley. The thing that killed me was that when he cut through the bull crap, he was an okay guy, but the absolutely constant fabrications, even down to where he went to college or the neighborhood he grew up in, bending of the truth, lies, and Baxter being really broke any trust I had in him almost 20 years ago. My husband and I heard that the Presidio in San Francisco had opened for camping. My mom grew up there, so we decided to go. We set up our tent during the day, then went into town. We came back at night when it was dark. On the path to our tent just after the parking lot, there was a guy sitting by a fire. We were friendly and said hello, etc. He just stared silently back at us. I had the worst feeling I've ever had. I told my husband how I felt, and he said it was fine. I was just scared, no big deal, but I wasn't just scared. I had an intense feeling that we needed to leave immediately, so we got to the tent, and my protective husband was still trying to make me feel better. We are religious, so he suggested we say a prayer, and that would make us feel better. Halfway through the prayer, I had the words run out in my head. My husband stopped in the middle of his prayer and said, "I feel it too. We need to run now." We bolt out of the tent and go running through the woods. Since we couldn't go back the way we had come, we came out to a road and flagged a car down and asked them to follow us as we walked around back to our car so we would have their lights and someone with us. When we got there, the guy was gone. Remember, his fire had been right by the parking lot. We went to a hotel that night, and the next day when we came back to get our tent, we could tell he'd been in it. Listen to your instincts, people. I volunteer at a public library and was cornered by this random guy one day when I was organizing the super dusty, most isolated section of the library. I heard some noises and turned my head in the direction. I saw this guy that looked like that one man from the meme with a guy that's bald but also alongside hair, looks pretty and ugly at the same time. He was very tall and intimidating. I don't know why, but I got the feeling he killed someone before, probably just my mind being dumb from fear, but his face really was terrifying. I worked in the morning when there were little to no patrons and I had no co-workers. I made eye contact with the guy and he just stared me down. He looked like he was about to run at me or something. I decided if he came closer I was going to throw the book I was holding in. Looking around the corner, he didn't ever move but kept staring at me. I kept working and organizing but also keeping an eye on the guy. This man never broke eye contact. Eventually, I finished and ran away as calmly and normally as possible, hid in the bathroom and waited for a long time until it was the time people show up at the library. Most likely I was overreacting, but I still have not forgotten about the man. Weirdly enough, security guy never saw him enter. I volunteered at the library too. Lots of homeless guys would come to my desk and start rambling weird stories, so after listening for a while I would get up and excuse myself. At least they were nice. They just wanted someone to talk to. The creepiest guy at the library was a normal patron. I was reshelving a book and noticed him sitting at a table reading. His shoulders were shaking. I thought he was laughing over something in the book. When I rounded the corner, I could clearly see he was casually winking. Creepy. This story gets creepier as it goes on. Bear with me. I've always been the kind of person who sympathizes with the reserved kids sitting alone in corners, as I was one myself, so being in a classroom seat neighboring one of these shy guys, I decided to try to make an acquaintance of him. While he scribbled comics into a notebook, I complimented his piece and did not realize what an effect it had on him until the next class. During a trigonometry test, he scratched something onto a scrap sheet and slid it to the corner of his table. At first, I thought he might have been requesting some answers, but at a second glance, I could see the bold arrow pointing towards me. "I like you a lot," it said. I chuckled and shrugged it off, to which he responded by adding, "I really mean it. I've never rejected anyone." So I had no clue how to respond to him when the bell rang and decided I needed more time to think it out. Now, not to be rude, but this poor kid was there, the exact opposite of my type of scrawny little white boy with an afro and the personality of a rock. That's not to say I think he deserved to be alone, but I knew that I didn't want to be the one to keep his company when I caught him drawing me the next class while I was asleep, and the class after the yet don't expect me to stay alert through a 2-hour trick class anyway. He handed me the second drawing and asked if I'd eat lunch with him. I somehow managed to stammer out an excuse. Both times, he asked and began to avoid him from then on, but apparently, the class knew he liked me and thought I may have had feelings for him, as I was the only one to treat him with kindness. It wasn't a surprise when during an educational film the desks all happened to shift away from this kid, and while I was in the bathroom I had to listen to him telling me about his dogs and game developing skills for 2 hours. It was the most talkative he ever been, so I felt a bit guilty. On my way outside of the school that day, he came up to me and talked to me about his suicidal tendencies for about 40 minutes while my mom waited for me to come outside. Obviously, I visited my counselor about this. She did absolutely nothing but humiliate the kid by calling him down while I was still seated with her and making him confess to following my group around while I was at lunch. Very creepy. If you ask me, he had been trying to catch me alone, which was why I always walked with friends. I'd been trying to avoid him drawing me while I was sleeping, having suicidal tendencies and crushing things out of anger. Whenever he was mildly upset, he would break mechanical pencils, erasers, paper, etc. After that, she made him admit to having obsessive behavior. Get ready for this. He told me that most of his passwords were my name. He wrote my name over and over, and that I was the subject of many short stories he wrote. Yeah, I'm flattered. Sarcasm, but no thanks. Fortunately, this was nearing the end of school, so I was able to ignore him until then, but I was feeling really guilty and scared the whole time. I hadn't meant to cause him so much stress and trauma, and what if I'd triggered a suicide response this year? However, I have no classes with him, and also maybe my counselor was good for something. He is doing fine. I often see him in the halls and he seems to be spending time with a girl I used to know. She has a similar disposition. This could be good for both of them, I guess, but to me, he was definitely the creepiest kid I've ever encountered. WF at the therapist, not respecting any kind of boundaries whatsoever. You. Thanks for listening. The subscribe button and activate the notification bell for more things you don't want to know. Let us know in the comments what you think about these stories.